So it's taken me a while to figure out what I wanted to say about Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted 2. Well, more so how I wanted to say it because I was unable to actually play the game when it first came out, and I had to wait to get into it. By then, all of my peers' videos had come out. FNAF, Rytoast, pretty much the only one I was beating in terms of speed was Game Theory, but even now their video is out and I'm just making this one. But I think I know just what I want to say now and how to do so. It's another Mimic video, but also a Glitch Trap one, a Vanny one, a Maskbot video, and pretty much every other character who I believe makes up the Mimic family tree, as I'm calling it. And believe me, this gets just as complicated as the Aftons, so hold on tight while we examine the entire Mimic bloodline. But first, what does Help Wanted 2 tell us that adds to what we already knew? Well, for starters, I think this game makes it very clear that Glitch Trap is present in the AR world, is likely also represented by Helpy, and although they may be a separate entity from the Mimic, it is still made from its programming. I'll explain further later, but basically although Glitch Trap is a piece of the Mimic, it's a piece that exists on its own, separate from the actual endo. And we'll explain why that is and how it happened later on. In the meantime, let's start with our big bad Mimic. The Mimic itself is obviously going to be the precursor to every other character I'm going to be talking about here. They are the starting point. They're the character that without them, none of the others could exist. For the uninitiated, the Mimic is an endoskeleton created by Edwin Murray in the 1980s, created for the express purpose of mimicking what it sees. This was initially designed to keep Edwin's child company while he worked, but Fazen also saw that its programming had the potential to save time and money. If someone showed the Mimic how to dance, it could and would. Ultimately, the Mimic would be infused with agony and go on a rampage in Edwin's factory, killing several people in bizarre and unique ways. This Mimic then gets brought to the Pizzaplex and trapped in the pizza place below the surface. There's a lot that happens between those two time periods, but for simplicity's sake, we're just going to continue. Below the Mimic on the family tree are characters who I say directly spawn from the Mimic via the Mimic 1 programming. These characters are Glitch Trap, Tiger Rock, and the Monty Within, all three of which would appear to be digital manifestations of the Mimic's code, Mimic 1. Let's start with the latter two since they're both book characters and probably not as well known. I should also mention that there are likely other digital manifestations of the Mimic throughout the books, but I chose these two specifically because I feel like they have the strongest evidence of a Mimic connection. The Monty Within is referring to a version of Montgomery Gator that comes from an arcade cabinet at the Mega Pizzaplex. In the short story The Monty Within, Kane is a high schooler who decided to make his final project about how the left side of the human brain essentially acts as an AI does. It takes in information, correct or incorrect, and generates a response that the right side of the brain can either accept or disregard. This arcade cabinet actually harnesses the power of that left side of the human brain. The way it works is Kane chooses a character to play as, and his partner is Monty. While Kane plays, he notices that Monty actually mimics his movements, and when he concentrates on other characters, such as Orville, Monty actually glitches and freezes up. Eventually, Kane returns to this machine and breaks it on accident, leading him to become quote-unquote possessed by the Monty Within. From this point on, Kane has battles with a voice in his head that influences his actions, making him behave destructively and rudely to those around him. Inside, Monty's brain and his are clashing. The story actually ends with Monty taking over completely, and making Kane lie down on a saw table so Monty could cut himself out of Kane's head. For this family tree, we'll have Monty, but we're also adding Kane directly under Monty, since this was kind of a Vanny situation going on. If this is how Glitch Trap functions, then it's good to know how that works, I guess. Next is Tiger Rock. Tiger Rock is a character who manifested inside a VR game played by a teenager named Kai. Kai first encounters Tiger Rock when a VR version of Glamrock Freddy introduces the two in the future Mega Pizzaplex. However, when Tiger Rock becomes aggressive, Kai tries to escape. Eventually, Kai is able to leave virtual reality, but things around him are very strange. Kai sees Tiger Rock pretty much everywhere, in animals, clocks, plush toys. Eventually, though, in his own bed, waiting for Tiger Rock to kill him, Kai realizes he was still in the VR booth. He ends the simulation and is finally safe. That night, however, Tiger Rock crashes through his window and kills him by ripping his arms off. The story leaves it ambiguous as to whether or not Kai ever actually escaped the virtual world, but in my opinion, that doesn't matter so much. What makes Tiger Rock interesting in comparison to the Monty Within and Glitch Trap is actually in how closely tied to the Mimic's origin he is. Presumably, both Tiger Rock and the Monty Within come from the Mimic 1 code being distributed by the storyteller, which, as fate should have it, was a head that resembled Tiger Rock. It's unclear where this head came from, but I once theorized that it is the Mimic's original head, and the one we see the Mimic have in Ruin, since in the books, the Mimic very clearly has a newer head with rabbit ears. It's fuzzy still, but yeah. Tiger Rock even remembers having learned hide and seek, something it played with Edwin's son in its original story. It even taking the form of a white tiger is also connected to the white tiger toy Edwin's son had. For this reason, I believe Tiger Rock is probably the digital manifestation most directly connected to the Mimic Endo, with Glitchtrap and the Monty Within being offshoots. That leaves us with Glitchtrap here. Glitchtrap, as far as we know, is a version of the Mimic 1 program that was introduced to the Fazbear Virtual Experience after Mimic circuit boards were scanned by Silver Parasol Games. It's likely that this version of the program, being essentially born into Help Wanted, is the reason it takes a form very similar to the series' main villain at the time, William Afton. As evidence though that Glitchtrap is in fact still a version of the Mimic, the suit it wears is not like the normal suits worn by Fazbear animatronics, but instead the mascot costumes that can be seen in the Mimic's lair in Ruin. Glitchtrap is half a copy of William and half the Mimic's own personality. What makes Glitchtrap different than other versions of the Mimic does seem to be in who it's copying at the least, since it picked up some habits from William that would later be passed down to Vanny, who is on the third part of this line, alongside Kane. In Vanessa's mind, Glitchtrap forces the Vanny persona to come out and act violently, seemingly against Vanessa's will, i.e. where the reluctant follower part comes from. At the end of Help Wanted 2, it does seem like Vanny is able to eventually conquer Glitchtrap, but lucky for this rabbit, she's not his only victim. To date, it seems like there are at least 3 other people who were corrupted by Glitchtrap at some point. The first is Gregory, who was likely corrupted around the same time as Vanessa, possibly from one of the Pizzaplex's many Mimic-infested attractions, such as BB's Air Adventure. This leads him to take the identity of Dr. Rabbit, as explained in the story GGY. Dr. Rabbit's role seemed to be in monitoring Vanessa, who Glitchtrap may have been worried about turning against him. Dr. Rabbit was there to keep her in check and prevent her from telling anyone about Vanny or their plans. If they got too close to the truth, he would bring them to the Pizzaplex and have them be killed by an animatronic. This even happens to one of Gregory's classmates, named Tony. Next is the player character of Help Wanted 2. Since the popular consensus seems to be that this character is Jeremy, that is how I'll refer to him as. I'll also say that I do believe this character is Cassie's father, but that's shaky as well and not confirmed. He also seems to have a connection to Bonnie, specifically through this mask, but I'm not putting all my eggs in the Bonnie bully basket. Anyway, this character wore a specific Vanny mask that was designed by the original Vanny to corrupt the technicians after the Pizzaplex was destroyed. We can't be certain if our character was the only technician or one of many, but I frankly do think he was the only one. As we progress through the game, Jeremy is guided by Helpy, who seems to be another depiction of Glitchtrap, something else that we also saw in Ruin. Eventually, the player character sees 2 things. The first is Glitchtrap emerging from a charging pod, which has a lot of implications, and the second is the perspective of Maskbot, giving Cassie the Vanny mask. In my opinion, I think it's likely that Jeremy is killed in the real world and possesses Maskbot's coding to give his own daughter the Vanny mask and keep the cycle going. As for Glitchtrap in the charging pod, I think here's where I'll also be adding Burntrap to the list. Since I don't know if he should be below or beside Burntrap, I'm just gonna put him like this. I think it's clear now that Burntrap and Glitchtrap are one and the same. Is Burntrap the Mimic? Well, technically. I believe that Burntrap was a Mimic of sorts, created from William's body and infected with Glitchtrap, but he's nothing more than Glitchtrap in the real world. But you know what? This family tree isn't goofy enough. So far, I've stuck to human characters and digital manifestations. But it's not like every Glamrock behaves the same when they're corrupted, so let's run through some animatronics. The problem is that it is unclear which of these Mimic AIs they're actually possessed by. Glitchtrap is not likely. Tiger Rock, as far as we can tell, is limited to 1 VR booth, and the Monty Within should kind of be gone. Since it's likely the storyteller that corrupted them, I am going to put them under Tiger Rock's lineage, just fair warning. But anyway, I'm putting every Glamrock animatronic, Endo, and Staffbot, with the exception of Maskbot, here. And yes, that includes Mapbot. All of these machines seem to be running under the same Mimic code that was presented in the storyteller, the same code that corrupted the VR booth and created Tiger Rock, and the same code that created the Monty Within. Technically speaking, the only digital manifestation this doesn't apply to is Glitchtrap, since he came before the Pizzaplex was built. But moving on, there are even more animatronics that are infected by Mimic code that could not be from the storyteller and Tiger Rock, and they are the AR animatronics. Now, something could be said that maybe AR in universe is a physical service, or just an AR service, but for this we're gonna be assuming that the animatronics of AR were real. Similarly to Help Wanted, FNAF AR's animatronics turn aggressive when bad code is scanned into the game. It's unclear if this code is Glitchtrap himself, or just the Mimic 1 code from the same circuit boards, but hey, they're there. Remember when I said this family tree was almost as complicated as the Aftons? No, this one's way more complicated. But the main purpose of making this family tree was not just to show all the connections I could find and make, but also just share how fascinating I find the modern story. And I think Help Wanted 2 helps us out a lot. I may attempt to plot out Jeremy's timeline, but it's really cool that he's back in the story, and I find his ending to be so tragic. Furthermore, we should definitely talk about Princess Quest 4 and the implications it has. For example, that sword you wield in PQ4 is the same sword found in Princess Quest 3's cabinet. How did it get there? But the main thing Help Wanted 2 did for me is really solidify my feelings on the character of Glitchtrap and how I see him. I think Glitchtrap is a great main antagonist, and him pushing along the story through his victims is a very entertaining way to watch it play out. In fact, most of these antagonists have been real hits with me. I would love to see the Monty Within again at some point, or Tiger Rock, or some further explanation on how the Mimic code works. From what I gather, every instance of Mimic 1 is pretty much its own character, which not only helps in separating them from one another, but also helps us keep better track. If I say the Mimic, you know who I'm talking about, but if I say Helpy, you know what I mean there as well. So what can we expect going forward? Honestly, the only two lines worth following for story purposes, in my opinion, are going to be this original Mimic and Glitchtrap. Furthermore, Glitchtrap seems to be functioning as the antagonist of the virtual world and is responsible for possession, while the Mimic itself is responsible for basically everything else. Depending on how hard future games lean into the Vanity Mask, I think we're likely to see more of Glitchtrap than the actual Mimic, and definitely expect to see some new faces crop up. If I had to guess, the next time we see Cassie, there will likely be some sort of time skip, and I think she'll be the main antagonist. That said, with Help Wanted 2's good ending, I'm conflicted. Does this ending mean that Vanny has finally beaten the Glitchtrap influence in her head? If that's true, then Vanessa could come back as a protagonist. But hey, there's a lot to talk about in regards to the Princess Quest cabinets, what it means, and where the series is headed now. By the way, before this video ends, I do want to share an update regarding my Youtooz collection, as I recently received my flocked Bonnie and Chica figures. Overall, I think these two are easily some of the best Youtooz has to offer, and I picked them explicitly because these are two FNAF 1 characters that I didn't have merch of beforehand, which is really insane to say out loud now that I think about it. I have Freddy, Foxy, and Golden Freddy merch, but not these two. From the moment I opened up these boxes, I was absolutely stunned with the quality. First off, these guys actually have much more appealing colors than the original versions of the figures. It's a bit hard to make out, but from what I can tell, both characters' flock surfaces have a more saturated color to them, which is really nice. The flocking also makes these figures more closely resemble their movie counterparts, which is super nice since these were the figures dropping at the same time as the movie. Overall, I think these are some of Youtooz' best in terms of quality. I know last time I talked about Youtooz, I said their Burn Trap figure was my new favorite, but I honestly gotta give it to these ones now. The textures make all the difference in the world. For now though, this is my sort of map to guide through the twisting thicket of the Mimic family tree. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe, and check out my last video where I talked about some of the political connections in the FNAF series. I'm Demuted, peace.